Hi guys, hold on for a second. Before we proceed to the video, I have something very important to tell you. Professor Jon V. Kofas has published his new book in collaboration with Little French Media, and the title of the book is Neoliberalism, Inequality, and Authoritarianism. This book details how neoliberalism impacts the geopolitical economy in the 21st century. You can buy it from Amazon, and the link is in the description. Thank you. Now let's proceed to the video.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to a brief overview intended to introduce a video session which I did some time ago on foreign policy under neoliberalism in the neoliberal era in the last 45 years or so. Neoliberalism, of course, was introduced in the Western world. It started in Chile as an experiment under the auspices of the United States when the CIA overthrew duly elected president of Chile, Salvador Allende, in 1973, and helped to install a military dictator, General Augusto Pinochet. And this is when neoliberalism was institutionalized officially with the help of both European and American economists, including Milton Friedman and Friedrich Hayek, the Austrian, or two of the fathers of neoliberalism. The foreign policy of neoliberalism, the foreign policy under the neoliberal model, which is basically a corporate welfare model intended to strengthen capital and um, uh, diminish the role of the social welfare safety net and basically help to maximize capital accumulation. This coincided the dawn of this era under the Thatcher and Reagan period. The Thatcher in the late 70s, Reagan in the 1980s. This coincided with the rise of neoconservatives who, of course, advocated, as they still do, military solutions to any diplomatic crisis. And they were rewarded in the 1980s because the fact is that the pressure from the West, especially the United States, helped to bring down the Soviet Union. So, what we have is the coincidence of the rise of neoliberalism concurrently um, with a policy of heightened militarism. Now, the uh, the fact is that foreign policy of a country reflects its domestic policies, which are embedded in the social contract of each country. This is true. So there is a sense of continuity with regard to neoliberal policies from the Cold War era. Let's just take the contemporary period from the Cold War, the early Cold War, all the way to the present, which is in fact we're living in an era of a new Cold War, as everybody knows who follows the international affairs, with the US, NATO bloc, the G7, basically setting itself up um, as a bloc determined to contain what it regards as four major enemies. At the head is China, with its uh, strategic partner, Russia, and then two other countries as part of what the West looks as the axis of evil, which is, of course, Iran and North Korea. This is not to say, by the way, that those four countries are made up of angels by any means. That's not true at all. It is, however, intended to point out that there is an East-West divide here, once again mirroring the Cold War. So there's a sense containment militarism, which of course existed during the Cold War. Those of you who again have studied this era, foreign affairs in this era, we have a continuation of that. So now the question is, in this video that I invite all of you to watch with regard to foreign policy under neoliberalism, what is so different? The difference is that everything under the neoliberal model is commodified, including human beings. The commodification, of course, of war and foreign policy was very evident in the very latest crisis, which is the what happened in Lebanon, presumably according to the New York Times as well as the Associated Press, other Reuters, other news organizations. Mossad, the Israeli intelligence agency, seems to be allegedly, we have no, they certainly haven't admitted it, but was behind these devices, these handheld devices, the pagers and the walkie-talkies, um, programming them to detonate, and of course, using what would be otherwise high-tech devices that people use for communication purposes in order to kill people, which they said were terrorists. However, we know now the evidence is in. The vast majority, of course, were just civilians, including children, as various United Nations, both at the Security Council and the General Assembly, representatives from around the world pointed out in their speeches, including, by the way, France, which is categorically on the side against what Israel did and on the side of Lebanon on this one. So it's not just, in this case, it's not that you have a solid Western support for Israel in this particular case. Expanding the war in Gaza and taking it down to Lebanon, supposedly to eliminate the pro Iranian Hezbollah terrorist threat, when in fact it's a war against Lebanon. And this is exactly what concerns the French government, among others, by the way. Germany hasn't been exactly enthusiastic about it this either. The United States is about the remains solidly behind Israel, but we don't expect anything more. Now, in this video, I invite all of you to watch. You'll see that for the foreign policy of countries, especially the Western countries, but you have some of that in the Western countries I mentioned, by the way, because under the auspices of the United States and the leadership and the assistance of the United States, geopolitics is used as a means to achieve geoeconomic goals. And the strategy is always to rely on military solutions rather than diplomacy. Use military solutions first, diplomacy last, which is contrary to the classical model of using diplomacy first. And if that fails, then you go to war. And that has not been the case. It's war first. And then we'll see what happens. Um, Now, and unfortunately, by the way, this is what has led us. I mean, even today, the latest news from Russia is that it's not backing down from redefining the its nuclear policy, and presumably the assumption is the first strike policy, that it will exercise the use of nuclear weapons. And by the way, just for the record, they have the most nuclear weapons on the planet. And if you include China in this, which, by the way, doesn't have many, about 500 or so nuclear warheads, but that is a dangerous course to take. Now, I invite all of you to please take a look at this video, write comments, ask questions. If you want to know more about how the neoliberal model impacts foreign policy, obviously, you start with the defense contractors, which have a lot to benefit from, but the defense contractors were benefiting from World War One, as those of you who know about the role of defense contractors in that period, it's more than 100 years ago. So that's that, but it's much more complicated than that. It is about securing market share on a world scale through the use of using the military as leverage. I also invite you, by the way, before I forget, to join this channel. This is Asad Alim's channel, and I ask you to become subscribers. Thank you very much.